Last winter, I bought cod fillets at Costco like everybody else, 3 pounds of it, boneless and skinless and easy, and I did not think about it once on the drive home. $31. Then I cooked two and watched a puddle of white liquid come out into the pan while the fish shrank to about 2/3 of what went in. 34 years behind a fish counter, and I paid for water because the package was convenient. Here is my claim, and I want you to hold me to it. By the end of this, you will buy better fish for half of that and know exactly what you give up in exchange. This is not a story about the cod being a different fish. 11 items. 2 of them my own trade will not thank me for. Good, nothing to buy at the end of this. Here is number 1. Number 1. The word fresh on that case is doing almost no work. Read what the company itself says about that product and you will find the phrase previously frozen sitting right there in the description, along with a note that because the fish was thawed at purchase, you ought to cook it within a day or two. I want to be fair about this because it matters for everything else I am going to tell you. That is disclosed. Nobody hid it from you. It is printed where anyone can read it, and almost nobody does, because the case says fresh in large letters and the mind stops at the first word it recognizes. But understand what you have actually bought. The fish was caught, frozen hard somewhere out at sea, carried across an ocean in that state, thawed on somebody else's schedule in a room you will never see, and handed to you on a 48-hour clock with its one freeze already spent. You cannot put it back in the freezer without paying for it in texture, because the second round of ice crystals goes through muscle that has already been opened up once. So the flexibility that a frozen fish gives you, the whole reason freezing exists, was used up before you got there. You paid fresh money for it and received none of the benefit. Number 2, you are also buying water, and the trade has a word for that. Sodium tripolyphosphate. It goes into a bath that fillets are soaked in before freezing, and it makes the muscle proteins hold on to water they would otherwise give up. One consumer suit put the added weight at somewhere around 13%. Think about what that means at $8 a pound. The evidence turns up in your pan. A milky white liquid weeps out of the fish as it heats, the fillet visibly contracts, and what you plate is meaningfully smaller than what you unwrap. Checking takes 4 seconds. Turn the package over and read the ingredients, because a piece of fish should have exactly 1 ingredient. If there is a second line about retaining moisture, you have your answer. At a counter, ask whether it is dry. That is the actual word we use, and the opposite of dry is wet, and wet means treated. Which brings me to the part of the journey nobody prints anywhere. Number 3, twice frozen, and that phrase will not appear anywhere on the box. The trade term is double frozen, and the route is straightforward once somebody describes it to you. A boat freezes the fish solid at sea because that is the only honest way to hold a catch through a season that runs about 4 months. Ashore, the blocks get thawed so somebody can cut them into fillets, trim them, portion them, and pack them. And a great deal of that middle work now happens wherever labor costs least, which means the fish crosses an ocean, gets thawed, gets cut, gets frozen a second time, and crosses back. What the research finds is drip loss, patches of dehydration, small gaps opening between the muscle flakes, and a gumminess you feel under the fork rather than taste. Instrumented work found it took measurably more force to push a probe into double frozen samples than into single frozen ones. Now I have to give you the other half, because the literature genuinely does not agree with itself here. One group found double frozen cod distinctly worse on water loss during cooking and on eating quality. Another found that once the portion has been battered and breaded, and the fish was processed after rigor the way commercial fish usually is, the difference stops being reliably detectable at all. A third found no meaningful extra deterioration after 9 months of storage. So I am not going to stand here and tell you every twice frozen fillet is ruined, because I would be overstating what anybody actually knows. What I am telling you is that it happened to your fish and that no part of the label was ever going to mention it. Number 4, you are buying about a third of an animal and paying for the disposal of the rest. A cod gives up roughly a third of its weight as skinless, boneless fillet. The remainder is head, frame, skin, gut, and trim, and somebody has to charge you for handling all of it, whether you take it home or not. That is most of the distance between $4 and $8. The part that ought to bother you is what sits in that other two-thirds. The cheeks are the best 2 bites on the animal, and the throat behind them is not far off. The frame is a quart of stock, if anybody bothers to simmer it, and the liver is the reason the phrase cod liver oil exists in the first place. All of it went into a barrel so that you could have a rectangle. Number 5, the cod is almost certainly cod, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. If you came to this expecting me to tell you that the fillet in your freezer is really pollock, I am about to disappoint you, and I would rather disappoint you than sell you something I cannot stand behind. Here is what the testing actually shows. 2 separate studies in the United Kingdom put cod mislabeling at 7.5% and at under 2.5%. Spain came in at 6% across 546 samples. Canada 7, Sweden 4. One survey across North Atlantic countries found no substitutions in retail whatsoever. The American National Work found 15 species being sold under the cod name, and the substitutions clustered heavily in restaurants rather than in stores. I will give you the ugly end of the range too, because leaving it out would be its own kind of dishonesty. Ireland has come back at 28%, Italy at 55%, Estonia at nearly 60%. Across 9 North Atlantic countries, the error rate has been measured anywhere from 0 to 60%, depending on where you stood and what you picked up, and processed forms, the salted and smoked and prepared products, come back wrong far more often than a plain fillet does. But set that against snapper for a moment, where national testing found 7 real fish out of 120 samples. And you can see that these are not the same kind of problem at all. Cod at a warehouse club, sold whole and unprocessed by a company with a supply chain it audits and a name it has to protect, is very probably exactly what the sign says. So the accusation I am making is a duller one. It is not that somebody swapped your fish. It is that you were sold the most processed possible version of a real fish in the format that conceals the most about it, and charged a premium for the concealment. And I will tell you why the duller version is the one you almost never hear. Outrage sells product. I have watched people in this trade lean hard on the fraud story at counters and in print, and I have watched customers walk out believing they had been robbed when what had actually happened to them was something slower and less dramatic and considerably more expensive over a lifetime. Number 6, buy whiting and buy it whole. Silver hake, if you want the name on the paperwork. It sits in the order Gadiformes, which is the order cod sits in one family across rather than one species across. So when I call it a cousin, I am not reaching for a marketing comparison. The relationship is real and it is on the chart. I should flag one thing before you go looking. Whiting is a loose name, and it covers several different fish depending on which coast you are standing on and which ocean the boat worked. In New England, it generally means silver hake. Elsewhere, it can mean Pacific hake or something in a different family entirely. So ask what the fish actually is rather than trusting the word, and if the counter cannot tell you, that is information in itself. The animal you want runs half a pound to a pound, though they reach 5. The flesh is white, mild, a little sweeter than cod, and a good deal less oceanic, and the flake is softer and finer. For most of my career, the trade regarded it as a nuisance, a fish that ate everything in front of it, including its own young, and priced it accordingly. That price never had much to do with how it eats. Number 7, learn what it looks like because this fish will not forgive you for guessing. Whiting spoils fast even by the standards of a cold water whitefish, and properly handled it gives you about 5 days from the boat, which is a short life. So you check it, and you check it in a way a fillet would never allow. Pick the fish up by the head and see whether it holds itself out straight or folds over your hand, because rigid is what you want and limp means the clock has run. The eye should be domed and clear rather than sunk and milky. Lift the gill plate and look for red, not brown. Run your thumb down the flank, which should be slick and firm, with the silver still bright rather than gone chalky. Anywhere the fish has been cut, the surface should look wet and translucent, never dull or brown or dried at the edge. Not one of those checks exists on a rectangle in a vacuum bag. That is the entire argument for buying an animal instead of a portion. Number 8, cook it whole head on with the flanks scored. Scale it under cold running water with the back of a knife, working from tail to head against the lie of them, and gut it through the belly. Leave the head attached. People remove heads because a head looks like work and because a headless fish fits a pan, and both of those reasons cost you the dish. The head and the frame hold the two sides of the fish together while the flesh softens. And on an animal this lean, there is almost no fat sitting in the muscle to keep it moist, so the structure has to do that job instead. Cut 3 slashes into each flank, angled toward the head deep enough to touch the bone. That is not decoration. Heat travels into a round fish unevenly, and the thick shoulder finishes long after the tail does, so the cuts let the middle catch up rather than leaving you with one end raw and the other end gone. Salt it inside and out, oil it lightly, and put it into a very hot oven or a heavy pan that has already come up to temperature. Do not move it. When the skin has set, it will release on its own, and lifting it before that point tears it and takes the best part of the surface with it. Number 9, pull it between 130 and 135 degrees, and here is where cod genuinely beats this fish. Cod is forgiving. It will sit at 145, which is the number written on most packages, and still come off the pan as decent food. Whiting will not do that for you. The window between properly flaked and unpleasantly soft is narrow on hake, and overcooking is the whole reason this fish carries the reputation it carries. The complaint is real, and it belongs to the cook. I cannot give you one exact number, and I am not going to invent one. A whole scored fish behaves differently from a fillet. Thickness changes everything, and the range I gave you is a range for a reason. Probe the shoulder, take it out at the bottom of that range the first time, and adjust once you have seen how your own oven treats it. And if what you actually want is a fish that tolerates being forgotten about, buy the cod. That is a real advantage. And for plenty of households, it is worth the difference in price. Number 10, do not fillet it. Eat it off the bone and put what is left into a pot. The temptation, once the fish comes out of the oven looking like an actual animal, is to reach for a knife and reduce it back into the shape you are used to. That surrenders the whole point of the last 9 minutes of this video. A knife in the hands of somebody who does this twice a year leaves a great deal of meat behind on the frame, and every gram of it goes in the bin, which is precisely the loss you were paying $8 a pound to have somebody else absorb on your behalf. Eating a small fish off the bone is not difficult, and it takes about a minute to learn. Run a knife or a fork tip down the spine from head to tail, and the top side lifts away in one piece because the bones all run in the same direction underneath it. Then take the tail end of the exposed spine, lift, and the entire skeleton comes up with the ribs attached and leaves the second side sitting clean on the plate. 2 sides, 1 skeleton, no waste. Before you clear anything, take the cheeks. They sit in the hollow just behind and below the eye, one on each side, a round nugget of muscle that has done nothing all its life but work a jaw. On a whiting, they are small. On a cod, they are enormous and they are the best 2 bites the animal has, and I would put them against a scallop. Then the pot, which is the part that changes the arithmetic. Heads and frames into cold water, a little onion and a bay leaf if you have them, brought up gently and held at a bare simmer for 20 minutes and no longer. Whitefish frames give everything they have quickly and then start giving you bitterness instead. So this is the rare stock where walking away is worse than being impatient. Strain it, and you have a quart of something a carton on a shelf will never approach. Look at what just happened to the price. The 2/3 of the animal you were paying somebody to throw away has become dinner and a quart of stock, and the only additional thing it cost you was 20 minutes of a pot sitting on a back burner. Number 11, stop buying boneless and skinless anything. Those 2 words are the most expensive instruction anybody gives a fish counter, and almost nobody standing on the customer side of the glass understands what they are actually purchasing with them. You are buying labor, and you are buying it at fish prices, which is a rate no tradesman in any other business has ever managed to charge for taking things away. Think about what leaves with the skin. The pattern and the color that told you what species you were holding and roughly how long it had been dead. The layer of fat that lives directly under the skin on almost every fish worth eating. The barrier that would have stood between hot metal and the flesh and stopped the underside welding itself to your pan. All of that is removed, and then the weight of it is subtracted from what you carry home, while the price per pound of what remains goes up to cover the removing. The bones take more with them than the bones. Attached to that frame are the collar and the cheeks and the throat, which are the parts anybody who works with fish eats first, and the parts that never once appear in a retail case, and the frame itself is the stock I described a minute ago. So here is the arithmetic laid bare. A cod arrives whole. Somebody removes about 2/3 of it, keeps the removed portion or discards it, sells you the remaining third at $8 a pound, and both of you agree to call that convenience. Boneless and skinless is not a cut of fish. It is the highest margin phrase in the building, and I have to put my own hand up here because I did this for a living and I did it cheerfully. I have stood at a bench taking skin and frames and collars off fish for customers who asked me to all day for years, and carried a bag of those exact parts home in the evening to feed my own family. Neither of us thought anything was happening. She got the rectangle she asked for, and I got the fish. That transaction ran every single day of my working life, and nobody on either side of the counter ever named it out loud. Let me give you all 11 in one breath. Read previously frozen before you read fresh. Count the ingredients on the back. Assume it was frozen twice. Remember, you are buying 1/3 of an animal, and do not expect the fraud story because it is not there. Ask for whiting, and ask what species that means. Look at the eye and lift the gill. Cook it whole, head on, flanks scored, out at 130. Eat it off the bone and simmer the frame, and stop saying boneless and skinless out loud. Now the arithmetic, run honestly, because I have watched people make this argument dishonestly. $8 a pound of cod fillet, with as much as 13% of that weight being water, somebody added, is really closer to $9. $4 a pound of whole whiting, eaten properly off the bone, comes out somewhere near $8 a pound of food on the plate. That is not half, and anybody promising you half has not done the sum. What the $4 buys is a fish frozen once or not at all, a frame you did not pay for, a price you can read without a laboratory, and an animal you can look at before handing over money. There is a larger thing underneath all of it. Atlantic cod used to be the 6th most eaten fish in this country and has fallen to 9th, behind farm tilapia and pangasius, because the stocks went and the price followed. The name did not fall with it. People kept asking me for a word they remembered from childhood at whatever it cost that week, while a perfectly good relative of that fish sat 4 feet away with a red pen through the price. You were not overcharged for cod. You were sold the most heavily processed version of a real fish in the format that conceals the most and told the concealment was convenience. A man came to me every Friday for 11 years and bought cod. One week I had none worth selling and talked him into whiting. He came back the following Friday and asked whether it freezes well, which was the whole conversation, and he never asked for cod again. So tell me in the comments where you are watching from and which of these 11 you had never heard. And if somebody older than you taught you a rule about buying fish that is written down nowhere, put it there too, because those are the ones I read twice. Next time, I am going to show you how to salt a whole fish the way it was done for 500 years before refrigeration in a refrigerator you already own with nothing but salt and a rack. There is one mistake that turns a cure into spoilage, and I will show you that mistake first.